So I'm incredibly honored to introduce our final speaker and keynote of the day. She's one of my personal heroines. I can't even believe she knows my name. And she spoke at our reception last night, Congresswoman Chellie Pingree, who is a crusader for farmers in Congress. And I can't thank her enough for all that she does to improve the food system every day. So please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Pingree to the stage.
Well, thank you very much for welcoming me here today. Thank you, Danielle, and everybody at Food Tank who's put on this wonderful conference. I feel so disappointed that I've had to spend the last 2 days up on Capitol Hill and haven't been joining all of you here. But I take great comfort in the idea that all these things will be available on the internet, and I can sit back and watch all the great speakers that you've all had the benefit to hear. When I look through the list, I won't even start naming all the wonderful people who I am a fan of or would love to hear a little bit more about what they have to say. So I think you've been treated to some really great information. And I also want to thank my good friend Kathleen Merrigan, who is now here at George Washington, and they're just so lucky to have her, and we were so lucky to have her at the USDA, and I continue to work with her, and I'm thrilled to be able to do that. I'm just going to say a few things since I know I'm the last speaker of your 2 long days. There's sort of a rule of thumb in politics. Everybody may have said everything already, but not everybody has said it. So I will just say it all again. If there's anything that's really exciting for me in this conversation, frankly, it's what's been going on in the last decade of food policy and conversations around these particular issues. Just in the 6 years that I've now served in Congress, I've seen an enormous amount of movement of the people who are engaged in this conversation and some of the opportunities out there for all of us to change. Just to quickly go back, 40-some years, I was born in Minnesota. I'm actually the granddaughter of immigrant farmers who came from Scandinavia to farm in the Midwest like so many people did. I ended up in Maine in the 1970s holding a copy of Helen and Scott Nearing's book called Living the Good Life, and like so many other people who came to New England or other places at the time, looking for a way to become a sustainable farmer and do all the things that we very idealistically assumed we could do, and I still believe we all can. I got involved in my own small farm, raised 3 children, had an egg delivery business, got in the wool and knitting business, and then somewhere along the way, about 20 years ago, got elected to my state legislature in the early 90s when food policy and farming issues were really just starting to rear their head in many of our legislatures. We had GMO bills, actually then. We had irradiated food and a whole variety of other things that we talked about, but basically, for the most part, anybody who was living on the land or talking about those things, even 20 years ago, it was still far from the mainstream of topics that you could really take up or think that you could move forward on. And I think it's amazingly exciting that fast forward to today, so much has changed. All of you are here today, and there are conferences that have been taking place in so many places over the last few years where people are really digging in and trying to figure out how to change our food system and have more of an impact on the food that we eat. I love to throw out a few statistics. One of my favorite that reflects, I think, what's going on in the marketplace, which is actually really moving food policy forward, is that 9 out of 10 parents who choose to buy baby food in the store are choosing organic baby food. So if you just think about that, that cuts across all economic levels, and that says a lot about what the future generation is thinking about how we want to feed our kids and what we want the future to look like. In my own state, which was once an agricultural state back in the 1800s, Maine fed the Union Army, and we thought of ourselves as one of the breadbaskets. Obviously, food and farming policy changed tremendously, but we're seeing that resurgence that's happening in so many places. Overall, agricultural sales in Maine have increased by 25% in the last 5 years. The number of farms in our state is actually going up, and the average age of our farmer is going down, which all are very exciting statistics and tell us a lot about what's actually going on out there. Again, I know you have been taking on in-depth everything about food and farming policy over the last couple of days, so either your head is swimming about what we need to do differently or how we can go about doing it. And I just want to reinforce that while there are a lot of challenges in dealing with this issue, when we look at what people are saying to us, whether what it's saying to their office or taking a poll recently in my home state, we ask people, if you could buy more food locally, would you be interested in doing it? And 85% of the people in our survey, and again, this is the state of Maine, we're not particularly wealthy, we cut across all Republican, Democratic, ideological lines, and 85% of the people said yes, 1% said no. And then we said to him, well, what about if it's a little bit more expensive? Because people always said, oh, this is so elitist, only people with money in their pocket will try to buy more food locally. Well, even then, 2/3 of the people in the poll said, even if it cost a little more, I would buy the food because it was healthier and because I wanted to support local farmers in my state. It's a complicated issue. Like I said, it stretches across all borders, Republicans, Democrats, demographically, old people, young people, but the fact is the marketplace is growing, more and more people are interested in doing something about it, and they just want to know what to do. Now, you've already talked a lot about the problems. There are enormous problems on Capitol Hill in trying to change food policy. The lobby around this issue spends about $150 million a year, has 1,200 lobbyists on the Hill, far outweighing the number of people, some of whom are here in this room or work for organizations that are represented here, a handful of people who literally lobby Washington on good food policy, nothing compared to what's on the other side. A lot of times people just have bad information. They get the wrong facts. They don't have the right information about how we could have healthy food policy, take care of our environment, feed more people in our country, enhance our rural economy. People are always saying, oh, you couldn't feed the world that way, so we just can't go about making these kind of changes. And unfortunately, all too often, all the good people who care about this issue sometimes just give up. They say, oh, the odds are so great against us. How will we ever make change? I'm not going to bother anymore trying to fix what's going on out there and how to fix this policy. I will say, thanks to Kathleen and many other people, some of whom, again, are in this room or have been around for the last 2 days, we've made some changes. We didn't get everything we wanted in the Farm Bill, but we wrote our own title to the bill, and we moved forward a lot of things that were helpful to small local farmers, an organic policy, making it easier to make the transition, making it possible to have healthier school lunches. We pushed on that idea, and we found a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who are willing to work with us. One of the most important things to remember about public policy when it comes to food, this isn't a Republican issue or a Democratic issue, has much more to do often about what region of the country you represent. Are you from corn country or cotton country or peanut country? Or do you have a community where you can see that that even conventional farmers are finding new ways to take advantage of the growing markets around organic or sustainably grown food or locally grown produce, supplying to a restaurant, all the things that are out there today as new opportunities. And many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle see that as a great opportunity and a good economic benefit for the future. We have a lot of challenges coming up in this particular session of Congress. And again, I know you've been talking about some of that. We're in a little bit of a defensive position, but I feel confident that in the long run, we're going to get to where we want to go. SNAP benefits and issues around hunger in our country have already taken a huge hit, but I see Gus Schumacher and others who have been working on the idea of making sure that we can allow people who get SNAP benefits to use those dollars and have them doubled to buy healthy food. So we're already working on that and how to implement it, and that was one of the great things that happened in the food bill. We've made some progress on child nutrition standards, but I'm afraid we're going to have another fight on that in Congress this year, and I'm sorry to see it going backwards. Trade policy, I know you've been talking about some international issues. We're worried about what's going to come up in that and the idea that we're going to have to, quote, harmonize our standards in the EU and put pressure on the EU through that on many of the things that they're ahead of us on, whether it's GMO labeling or reducing or restricting the use of antibiotics in livestock feed, hormone-injected beef, all kinds of things that are restricted there. We want to make sure that if there's a trade agreement, as the president asked for this week, we don't interfere with the good things that are going on in progressive food policy in Europe and make it even that much more difficult to move forward on these issues in the United States. So I know that you've already, as I said, dug deep on many of these things. And really all I want to say as you're, heading back to talk to your friends, thinking about your own involvement in this or what else you can do to be engaged, is when I look back on the 40 years ago when I first came to the state of Maine and, thought about this in a way that most people considered marginalized, when I tried to go to my land-grant university and they didn't have a sustainable agriculture program. Of course, they do today. We have just seen an enormous amount of movement and a lot of pressure from the outside of those of us who are lucky enough to be trying to make these changes on the inside. And nothing ever changes in public policy, whether it's in your home state or at the federal level, without an enormous group of informed activists who remind us every single day we have to do something about this. And even more importantly, in this particular movement, the market is already exactly where we want to be. Local farming accounted for $5 billion in annual revenue last year. If a farm is selling locally, it generates 13 jobs for every $1 million in sales, so there's an enormous amount of growth. There's over 7,000 farmers markets in our country. That's a 150% increase in the last decade. And everybody who's in the food industry today knows this is where the growth is going to be. It's the biggest growth in the restaurant industry. It's the biggest growth in retailing today. So this is where we're moving. So I just want to give you a little bit of hope and inspiration that we can move forward on this. I'm going to tell you one little story. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I'm on the Agriculture Appropriations Committee. But we were in another contentious hearing one day, and there's a lot of issues around energy, and one of my southern colleagues was talking about the tremendous war on coal and how angry he was that some of the people on my side of the aisle were fighting for clean air standards and a lot of other things. And so we had this very contentious fight about the war on coal and a variety of other things. And I had brought up this particular issue about the effect of herbicides on our monarch population. That's a story many of us know about and think of as sort of the canary in the coal mine about what's going on and the issues around pesticide approval, herbicide approval in this case. Anyway, after we got through our big contentious fight, he said, but there is one thing I want to say. I think we should have a monarch butterfly caucus. I just planted some milkweed in my backyard, and I think we can find some common ground on this. So maybe it's over the monarch butterfly, maybe it's a million other issues that we all care deeply about, like how we're going to feed our children in the future and eliminating the toxics in our environment. But we've got a lot of common ground out there. We have a lot of opportunities to move forward on this issue. I couldn't be more grateful that all of you have taken 2 days out of your own busy lives to sit down and think more deeply about this. And I so much want to express my gratitude to the organizers and to everybody else here today. And I look forward to working with all of you on a much healthier food future. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.